driver was stabbed to death in his cab. He lived in Stoke-on-Trent with his wife and 2 children under the age of 3. It seems likely that whoever killed Steve Johnson also lived in or near Stoke, but the information police need to find him might of course come from anywhere in the country. Steve loved spending time with his children, and we begin our reconstruction at the site of an old ruined castle, which is a popular place for family outings, just outside Stoke-on-Trent.
Look at that. Look at them lovely deer. They're great.
Steve Johnson was a kindly, unassuming young man. He was devoted to his family and would turn his hand to all kinds of odd jobs in order to earn money for them, especially with Christmas coming up.
Have you ever been this high up before?
Come on, Steve, let's go.
He and his wife Kathleen had 2 small daughters. This is Mowcop Castle, a beauty spot a few miles north of Stoke. It was just a short distance from here that Steve Johnson was murdered.
Can you pick up at 125 Cornville Road for me?
125 Cornville, Roger.
Enough to hand me?
Steve was training to be an insurance salesman during the day and worked nights as a taxi driver in Stoke.
Hi, she, you all right, Doug?
Hi, Steve, you're stuck, are you?
Yeah, fine. What car am I in tonight, love?
You're in Bravo 5, it's in the yard, Doug.
Okay. See you later, then.
All right,
Ta-ra.
Steve, draw, Doug.
Steve was a very likeable man. All the staff got on with him well. He didn't come in until about 9 o'clock in the evening, and when he came in, he'd always say to you, I've just put the 2 girls to bed. And he always seemed as if he did that before he come to work at night times.
The cab looked like many of the taxis in Stoke, except that only 7 cabs in the city have this distinctive red and black logo on the doors. Passengers may also remember the tiny portable TV he often took with him. With just 4 days to go now before Christmas, Friday the 21st of December was a busy night for the taxi trade. Steve was working solidly all evening. By 2 in the morning, he'd picked up more than 20 fares. His last identified fare was at around 3 in the morning when he drove this young woman home in the Longton area of Stoke. A dance club called Shelley's is near there.
Shelley's is packed tonight.
Yeah.
He may have picked up a passenger on his way back past Shelley's, but by around 3:15 a.m. he was heading in towards Hanley in the city centre.
What's Hanley like?
No cars, no people.
About 5 minutes after that, he radioed in to say he'd picked up another fare.
Bravo 5, she.
Bravo 5, Steve.
Hanley to Packmore.
Roger.
Roger.
Sometime before 4 in the morning, 2 villagers in Packmore were woken by what seemed to be an argument on the corner of Lordshire Place. No one knows whether this man returned to the cab or whether there was another passenger in the taxi as it drove off in the direction of Mowcop. A resident in Mowcop remembers hearing a car in the early hours labouring up the hill on Castle Road. The taxi office had expected Steve back within half an hour.
Bravo 5, Steve. Bravo 5, Steve. Bravo 5, Steve.
As time passed with no sign of Steve, the company sent another driver out to look for him.
Five, Steve, if you can hear me, give me a ring.
Steve's taxi was discovered at daybreak. All the night's takings and the mini TV set were still inside. Steve's throat had been cut, but he'd managed to stagger a few yards down the farm lane. The spot where he died is now marked by flowers. Well, Mr. Ravenscroft, nothing was stolen from his cab. What could the motive for this really horrible murder possibly have been?
Unfortunately, our inquiries have still failed to reveal a motive for the murder of Stephen Johnson. He was a young man with a young family, and despite extensive inquiries, I'm afraid that the crime still remains motiveless.
A really rotten crime. Let's have a look at the map of the area. On his return from dropping the woman in the Longton area at about 3 in the morning, he'd have headed back, probably past Shelley's Club, towards Handley in the Stoke city centre, from where he'd have radioed that final time to say he'd picked up a fare to Packmore, and then from Packmore on to Malcop, 2.5 miles away, where, of course, Steve's body was found in the early hours of that Saturday morning. Now, there are 6 fares still unaccounted for that Steve took during the course of that last night. Why are those so important?
Well, following an extensive examination of Steve's taxi, not surprisingly, a number of fingerprints were found. And we are eager, obviously, to eliminate these fingerprints. A number have been eliminated and have been put down to legitimate fares, and obviously we are eager to eliminate as many of them as possible.
So you need to account for as many as possible, hoping to reduce them just to the one set.
Hopefully.
And that's why also you're undertaking a massive fingerprinting exercise in Malcop itself.
We are. We're appealing to residents of Malcop to come forward and give us a set of prints, which I can assure them is purely for elimination purposes and will be used purely and simply in connection with this investigation.
So if you live in Malcop and haven't yet gone along, it's about 400 people altogether you need to see.
That's right.
Between the ages of 16 and 40. Please do go along. Finally, a very important sighting. A man was seen a couple of hours after Steve's body was found. That would have been about 7:30 on that Saturday morning, the 22nd of December. A woman was walking her dog at a place called the Rookery, about a mile from Malcop, and she had a very strange encounter with someone.
Is it the morning after the night before?
No, it's much worse than that.
And she gave you quite a detailed description, didn't she, of that man?
Yes, she did. As you say, this is an interesting sighting. He's described as wearing a cream or off-white shirt and what she describes as good quality blue trousers. He was a white male, aged about 30, and the particular thing that she noticed was his mousy hair was dishevelled as though he'd been out all night. She also noticed that he appeared to have scratches on his cheeks and what appeared to be blood stains on the left upper part of the shirt. Obviously, there may be a legitimate reason for this person being out, although it was unusual, the fact of the time of day and the time of year, the fact that he hadn't got a top coat.
So it's vital you find that man. Remember, it was 4 days before Christmas, the 22nd of December. Is there anybody else you need to speak to or anything else you'd like to add on this case?
Yes, on behalf of Stephen Johnson's family, I would like to appeal to anybody who may be harbouring any suspicions about a relative, a friend or a neighbour who hasn't yet come forward. I would urge them to ring the incident room and allow us to eliminate those people and thus remove their suspicions.
Mr. Ravenscroft, thank you. If you can give any clue as to who killed Steve or why, please do ring us straight away. The number here is 081 811 8181, or if you'd like to ring the incident room direct, the number there is 0782. If you could shed any light on the tragic death of the young taxi driver, Steve Johnson, from Stoke-on-Trent. Steve's body was found at first light, just yards from his cab, near the village of Malcop. He'd been stabbed to death, and we're talking about the very early hours of Saturday, the 22nd of December there.
Yes, we are.
You've had a lot of calls.
Yes, we've had several calls, particularly interesting in respect of the sighting of the young man at the Rookery, which we are obviously following up straight away.
Right. Now, what about those unaccounted for fares? There were at least 6 fares during the course of that night, the Friday the 21st of December, that you wanted to trace.
Yes, unfortunately the response has been disappointing as regards the fares that travelled with Steve that night, and I would renew the appeal to anyone that travelled within that night to come forward. I can appreciate there may be circumstances which do cause people to be reluctant, but I can assure them that any information will be dealt with in the strictest confidence.
Also, presumably, it's in their interest to have their fingerprints eliminated from your inquiries.
Yes.
Right. This was a meaningless murder of a quiet, unassuming man.
Yes. Although a tall person in stature, he was a very timid individual, and certainly, there's, as we've said earlier, no reason at all to give an indication as to the motive for this crime.
Please do help if you can.